This is Start, Launch, Grow, brought to you by Million Labs.
Here's what we cover in today's episode. In our catch-up, we talk about the difference between web and native apps and how this decision can drive your overall development costs. Then I will sit down with Charlie Ederson, project manager at Mission Inc., to discuss his Start, Launch, Grow journey. And finally, we wrap up with one clear takeaway. Let's get started. Hi, Simon. Good seeing you, first of all. Are you still feeling a little bit jet-lagged, or at least judging by how you look?
Thanks. Yeah, a little bit. It's always hard coming back from Mexico. The time difference kills you.
But maybe to give our listeners a bit of context. So we usually meet on a quarterly base, just, to review our strategy, define what we do next, etc. I think that's always better in person, although, we love working remotely, but talking strategy is just better with a cup of tea or a strong coffee. And this time we also met with one of our advisors in Mexico. So also quick shout out to Jason Long. Thanks again for your time. Super, super valuable lesson we had with you.
When we come away from those sort of things, usually it's just you and I catching up, or you, I, and some of the other members of the team. But when you bring in an external founder or an external mentor who happens to be a founder as well, you get the opportunity to get an external view of your business. And I think that's really valuable because you can go and get stuck in the weeds yourself, not really see the view, and somebody to come in and say, yep, that's right, or no, what are you thinking? That's madness. And it's really super helpful. And if you're not doing it as a founder, I really suggest you find somebody or some people that you can do that kind of bounce off with, even if it's once a quarter or, once a month, even better.
You don't have to sign up for a coaching program, right? Just go through your network, look for people on LinkedIn who's done something similar, right? And then just reach out to them and ask them for a paid hour to challenge your idea. I think you will be surprised to see how many people accept and how much value you get out of that.
Yeah, and you've got nothing to lose. You can ask the question. There's lots of founders out there that are kind of 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, and they're brilliant because they've kind of been through it. Yeah. And they're not Richard Branson or Elon Musk or whatever who went through it 10 years ago and don't really remember what the pain felt like and what they did in those circumstances. And of course, things change. But the guys and girls that are just a couple of steps ahead of you, they're really valuable. So yeah, reach out, find them. So, are we going to get into this topic?
Yeah, let's dive into today's episode. Yeah, into web versus native apps. And probably it makes some sense to quickly clarify the terms, because this is where we get a lot of confusion, right? So many people think a web app can only be used on a desktop, but that's not true. So a web-built app can be fully mobile responsive and work perfectly on your phone just through your browser. And the key difference here is that a native app is something you've downloaded from the App Store or Google Play, versus a web app runs in your browser. It doesn't require this installation, but you can still open it from your phone.
I think that's a small difference, and it might sound small, but actually it has a really big impact on a whole bunch of things, particularly development, because you're now developing for, let's say, the 2 major ones, which is Apple and Google. And you've also got to test in those 2 environments as well. So you've got to test all the models of iPhone. You've got to test the literally thousands of Android-type devices as well. Your problem you're testing for, like, let's say 3 or 4 different browser types, Chrome, Safari, Firefox, whatever, to now testing for literally thousands of devices. Does it work on a Samsung 170i that came out in 2016, or does it work on the latest iPhone? You've suddenly got this much bigger problem to deal with.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you just break it down into Android and iOS, it still requires a significant amount of time. I mean, significant not in the sense of what it meant in the old days, but when you now can build stuff very quickly, suddenly if we are talking about an additional 3 or 4 weeks, that matters, right? Because that's a time when you could have gone out and already talked to customers. Whenever you go native, our experience is that it can easily take around like a month more. Just, you're kind of reliant on their process, right? So Apple releasing a new version or Google changing a policy, or, there's a constant back and forth, and sometimes it goes all right. But in the majority of the cases, there's always a bit of a back and forth. It's just good to account for that when you make the decision.
And I think it also changes the cost as well. It doesn't massively increase it, but it increases it enough, maybe £1,000 to £2,000, $2,500, something like that. And that's just the extra effort it takes to make it mobile ready and get it mobile ready. But as you said, like the app stores can be an absolute nightmare. It could be 1 day or it could be 1 week it takes. And it's just an unknown. It's out of your hands. And anybody that's been through that experience is that, particularly Apple, they're pretty brutal. It's either it passes or it fails. And it's sometimes quite hard to figure out why it failed and what you need to change to do it. And that can take days to then try and figure that process. So time and money, definitely an impact there.
When we look at our data, we see that the majority of founders, they tend to overbuild their MVP, right? They spend 3 times more than their initial budget, and it takes them like 6 months or longer to launch. And obviously there are several reasons, but one of them is also, do you go native too early when it's not needed? It can, add or be one of the reasons why you just delay again and again. And early on, really, your main goal should be speed, getting something in front of users, learning and iterating. We probably repeat ourselves, Simon, by saying it again and again, but oftentimes in entrepreneurship, it's like you do the obvious, right? And you do it again and again. And so we probably sound like parents, don't we?
A stuck record, as we would say in English. We sound like a stuck record repeating the same bit. But yeah, I think whenever we speak to founders, we always say start with a web app. That's our kind of go-to advice because of those problems of cost, complication, maintenance of a mobile app, testing requirements, all of those things that we just talked about. Like those all slow you down and cost you more money before you can even speak to a user. And I know everybody wants an app in the App Store. Like it feels cooler. It feels like you've got a proper startup if you've got an app in the App Store. I get it. But as we said, it's probably not the right thing to do. The only reason that you'd say go for mobile app first, so into the app stores, is where you absolutely need mobile specific features. Now that might be GPS. It might be something to do with the camera that's completely native. It might be movement, the gyroscope that sits in most smartphones, etc. So if it is an app like that, sure, yeah, you've got to go mobile. But for everything else, I think as a question mark is, back to our previous episodes about minimum viable products, is this requirement for the value to prove the value? And if it's not, then go web first.
So what did we learn, Simon? Going native too early often leads to more complexity, higher costs, and slower progress. Unless you have a very clear reason to go native from day one, starting with a web app is usually a better choice for early stage founders. This just allows you to move faster, test your idea, and iterate quickly.
Exactly. So, Verena, let's hear your conversation with Charles.
Today, I'm joined by Charlie, who has helped build and grow multiple ventures. One of those is Mission Inc., an AI-powered platform to design, help leaders identify performance gaps, and turn insights into real impact. Welcome to the podcast, Charlie. It's awesome to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
To get started, could you tell us a little bit when Mission Inc. was founded and how the idea first came about?
Mission Inc. as an idea was formed by our founder and CEO, 𝗪𝗓𝗄𝗓, and that was to kind of crystallize a mission intent-driven leadership. What that means is you want all your people in the organization to know not just your mission and what their part in delivering it is, but we also want to delegate as far as possible down the hierarchy the ability to affect change. The philosophy behind that, and there's been quite a lot of research on this, but the philosophy is the people who are actually best placed to make critical decisions are the people at the tip of the spear in military ethos, the people at the coalface who are doing the work. So if you move that decision making away from the people who have the most information, then you degrade the quality of decision that comes back down. So what we've built with the support of Million Labs is a dashboard, a tool that will both push the information down the hierarchy for mission and what the organization leaders require from their people, and also pulls back up the real performance against those metrics. Plug AI into that, and you can get some real fascinating insights about data, especially big data sets that perhaps aren't evidently available to you if you're just looking with your own eyes.
Who is your main target customer?
We are targeting businesses who are problem aware, so they recognize and value leadership and developing their leaders, and they would need this tool to help deliver and embed that mission-focused ethos throughout the business.
As you know, our start phase is all about validating demand before building the main platform. You've already mentioned that Andrew, as the founder, he was obviously very close to the pain points and he observed that. Could you just walk the listeners a little bit through how the validation process looked like for Mission Inc.?
In terms of validating the philosophy, we knew that that was a valid philosophy. Andrew and other members of the senior leadership team in his past businesses had used this philosophy to turn around struggling businesses to make them profitable. But in terms of validating how that works in a platform and how the market reacts to that, that was a process that took a little bit more time, but we needed to understand the platform and where it fits into our business first, I think. And that understanding has evolved as we've grown the platform and we've learned more about what it can deliver for us. That then changes our understanding of how we go out to market and what we can sell this on as a tool for developing the business.
So if I understand you correctly, the business model itself was already proven before, right? Because it was part of a existing business, it was part of an infrastructure, but you basically took that and just applied it to another niche.
Yes, exactly. And as I said, I think while we were building it, we started to understand more and more, especially the value of that AI-driven insight. It sounds like maybe a minor value add, that we have the platform, and there's an AI plugged into it. When really data about data is or can be so valuable that having that AI embedded into an interrogation engine that can give us insight and surface insight we didn't know we had. So that's a really powerful tool.
Now with vibe coding and low code back then, it's building almost becomes part of validating. What did that process look like for you? What did your version 1 look like?
There was a lot of head scratching, a lot of planning out user journeys. I think we used everything from Figma to sticky notes to having it up on a big whiteboard. Vibe coding, as you say, it's such a big thing now, such an upcoming thing. But I actually think we benefited from going back to basics almost and really thinking through the problem rather than diving straight in with a prompt and then you perhaps don't know where you're going to end up if you do things that way.
I mean, we see it all the time that it's so easy to, get really distracted with the details of the build. And it's really easy then to forget why you are doing it in first instance, right?
So, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, if I can use an analogy, it's like when you're young and you want to start a band, everybody focuses on the band name, but maybe not so much on the music. It's the same here. We want to dive in. We want to be building, and it's so easy to do that just with with vibe coding prompt. But actually, that's not really perhaps the best way to go about it.
What would you say, Charlie, when you look back? Like, what were some of the key learnings you had from launching the application? Maybe also some things that surprised you.
I'd say the importance of really planning what you're going to do before you do it, because even planning in as much detail as I think we did, we got to phases where you go through user testing and something happens, you see something and you're like, this isn't right, and then you look back and you're like, but that's exactly what we asked for. So there's kind of no way in which you can over plan this. I think you have to be very, very clear about what you want to happen and what you don't want to happen, and somewhere in between those things is going to be the truth, I think.
What did you do in terms of user testing?
I had done a bit of user testing myself before we came into development. So I took all the testing myself in-house, spun up various different user accounts with different roles, and just went through the process in excruciating detail. But yeah, it was definitely a very valuable process with the trying to break the build.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, there are always a lot of edge cases, right? Like also, and you have to at some point also decide, what is really needed right now, and what could we do later.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually, because you can get so hung up on edge cases and treatment of these edge cases and the edge of the edge. As you say, there comes a point where you just need to draw a line and say that, this is it, and we're going to move on.
What happened once you launched it and first customers were using it?
Feedback, very positive to start with. And I'm quite glad that they were able to give us kind of useful feedback instead of just going and say, oh, we don't like this, we don't like that. Instead of having a negative mindset, they were very much understanding that they were early birds, they were first customers. They were getting a product that is powerful, but also not yet polished. So they were critical in helping us really put that last layer of polish on, especially from the UX point of view, because a lot of what we were doing to get into production was around simple functionality. If it works, ship it. Whereas, you come across a user who's never used the platform before, and they'll have a completely different set of eyes from me, who I see it in my sleep. I see it in my dreams. I've been testing it so much over the last days and weeks.
Do you have any recommendation for founders out there, like how to get your customers spend time with you and kind of be part of working on the version 2 of your product?
Yeah, I think that honesty is very, really important, because if you can say to someone, look, this is in production, but it's not polished. You are early to this platform, and we value your feedback. Then they're not just a revenue stream for you; they are a partner, and they will see the value in that as well. They will understand that they're getting access at perhaps a good rate to an early product, and in return, what they have to do is maybe be a bit patient about some things that might not work how they'd want them to, and engage with us and give us that feedback.
It's a lot also about expectation management, isn't it?
Everybody kind of sometimes, I think, falls into the trap of thinking that you have to almost show this final version. And actually, it's okay, I think, to have something that is functional, but not yet the final product, and be honest about it. I think that maybe one of the biggest challenges across the whole product life cycle was very early on. It was deciding particular directions that the product was going to take.
Last question from my side, Charlie. You obviously helped not only build Mission Inc., but also other ventures, as I know, right? Especially in the medical space. What are some of the key lessons you've learned for that experience of building multiple businesses? What is a piece of advice that you can share with listeners out there?
When you're working across multiple businesses, you just have to be flexible. You can't plan your week or maybe even your day, because there are so many different competing priorities. So you've got to be able to prioritize and think on your feet and just handle different situations, because no day is probably going to go how you thought it was going to. You just need to adapt and keep on going.
And I guess enjoy the process, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for being our guest today. A really interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Welcome back, Verena. Good interview with Charles. What did we learn?
Thank you. Well, I think one of the biggest learnings I took away from the conversation was the importance of really slowing down during the early build phase. So Charlie mentioned how his team spent a lot of time actually mapping user journeys on whiteboards, using sticky notes, and really finding out what do they need for their operation before jumping into development. This really helped them to also, reach their long-term target. So my takeaway for founders is just building doesn't bring you closer to the end result. You need to spend a lot of time understanding the problem and being really patient, right? Because it can be really rewarding later on.
So if you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more conversations like this, make sure you subscribe to our podcast at all the major podcast providers. Our goal is to encourage more people to take action and turn their ideas into execution, into a startup, into a project. We also run our Start, Launch, Grow newsletter, where we share practical advice for every stage of your journey. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next episode.